World War II is the deepest, bloodiest wound in human history, claiming the lives of over 70 million people. It is a nightmare that always makes us shudder when recalled. But what if I looked you straight in the eye and told you that this very brutal, inhumane war was the sole savior, the midwife for the entire modern world you live in? Look at the phone in your hand. It exists thanks to microchip technology. The microchip was born from the endless space race of the Cold War era. Space was conquered thanks to V-2 rocket technology developed in desperation by Nazi Germany to bombard London. And without the massive bloodbath of 70 million people called World War II forcing governments to frantically pour money into science, that phone would never exist. Imagine a world in 2024, no computers, no internet, no penicillin antibiotics, no commercial aviation. Instead, America locks itself behind giant fortress walls, ruled by a brutal fascist dictator, and 1 out of every 4 people is permanently unemployed, barely surviving day by day on food stamps. What would truly happen if the worst economic disaster in human history, the Great Depression of 1929, never ended? What would happen if the giant stimulus bomb called World War II never appeared to pull the global economy out of its darkest quagmire? Don't blink. In today's video, we will dissect the most shocking and terrifying alternate history scenario. A scenario where America collapses and rots from within, humanity's science and technology are permanently frozen in the 1930s, and we are locked in a permanent liquidity trap. Welcome to a cruel reality, when the Great Depression swallows the world. Before we begin, I need you to understand one thing. What you are about to hear in the next few dozen minutes is not a cheap conspiracy theory scavenged from Reddit, nor is it a sensational Hollywood sci-fi script. This is a cold, ruthless, and logical extrapolation based on the most rigorous macroeconomic models from the U.S. National Bureau of Economic Research, authentic historical data from the IMF, and proven theories of secular stagnation by the most eminent economists of the 20th century. Every number, every bloody consequence in this video is drawn directly by scholars from the real crossroads of history. The truth is always more terrifying than fiction. To understand the absolute horror of this scenario, we must dissect the nature of the Great Depression. Forget about the recessions you've known. From 1929 to 1933, U.S. economic output evaporated by 30%, unemployment hit 24.9%, meaning every time you stepped out on the street, you'd see a quarter of all adults with no jobs, no income, and no tomorrow. If World War II didn't happen, the global economy would be stuck in a malignant tumor that economists call a liquidity trap. Let's understand this mechanism in its simplest and most terrifying way. This is a state where bank interest rates drop to zero, even negative, but absolutely no one wants to borrow money to invest in business or shop, because they are too terrified of a bleak future. The prices of goods plummet continuously, a phenomenon known as deflation. You think cheap goods are a good thing? No. When people know a shirt or a loaf of bread will be cheaper tomorrow than today, they would rather hide their money under the bed, bury it in a hole than spend it. When no one spends, businesses go bankrupt. When businesses go bankrupt, millions are fired. When they lose their jobs, they spend even less. It creates an unstoppable death spiral. At that time, the ruling elite fell into the most vital ideological war in history. One side, represented by John Maynard Keynes, screamed, "The government must pump money. Must dig holes and fill them up and pay workers so they have money to buy bread." The other side, represented by the Austrian school of Friedrich Hayek, coldly declared, "Let the free market bleed. Weak businesses must die for the economy to purge itself." In our real timeline, the Pearl Harbor event in 1941 struck a finishing blow to this debate. America was forced to follow Keynes. They had to borrow tens of billions of dollars, pumping a massive amount of money into the economy to produce tens of thousands of tanks, planes, and ammunition. That frantic borrowing for war inadvertently created millions of jobs, completely shattering the liquidity trap. But in this permanent depression scenario, what if the Japanese Empire only focused on controlling Manchuria and never attacked America? What if Hitler was assassinated early and Europe maintained a fake peace? Without war, the American elite would continue to argue. They would fear budget deficits, they wouldn't dare pump money. The liquidity trap tumor would metastasize throughout the entire body. The middle class would be permanently wiped out, turned into the new peasant class of the 20th century. Economic crisis doesn't just destroy numbers on Wall Street, it devastates the very ground humans stand on. Did you know that accompanying the Great Depression was the worst environmental disaster in North American history, known as the Dust Bowl? Due to overfarming and prolonged drought, the entire topsoil in the American Midwest turned to dust. Giant dust storms hundreds of meters high swept away all life, suffocating cattle and children, turning fertile wheat fields into a second Sahara desert. In reality, the government under President Roosevelt poured millions of dollars to create soil conservation programs, paying farmers to plant millions of windbreak trees. But in a world where the crisis drags on endlessly, the budget dries up, the government is powerless. With no relief funds, not a single windbreak tree is planted. Farmers abandon their land, leaving millions of hectares barren and fleeing to the West Coast. The consequence? Desertification spreads uncontrollably. America, once the great breadbasket of the world, can no longer feed its own people. Famine will knock on every door. The meal of a middle-class American family in 1950 will be nothing but rotten potato scraps and boiled weeds with bones. Now, we will enter the most cruel loss for human civilization, technology. Data from 9 million US patents shows that the Great Depression completely wiped out independent inventors, especially young minds lacking capital. If the crisis prolongs, the creative capacity of a whole century will be extinguished, monopolized by a few giant corporate monopolies with conservative, timid mindsets, afraid to experiment with anything new for fear of loss. The true disaster lies here. Almost all the core technologies that shaped our modern world were incubated and born from the life-or-death fires of World War II. Without an arms race determining the survival of nations, no government would be crazy enough to pour $50 billion, equivalent to trillions of dollars today, into research and development, R&D. Without war, the first electronic computer ENIAC, originally created in 1945 to calculate complex ballistic artillery trajectories, would never be funded. Calculations would continue to stagnate with cumbersome mechanical punch card machines. The internet would just be a hopeless scribble on the drafts of dreamy scientists. But the backwardness of machinery is nothing compared to the price paid in blood and lives. Penicillin antibiotics were discovered by accident by Alexander Fleming in 1928. But did you know that it gathered dust in a lab for over a decade? It wasn't until World War II broke out, with the urgent need to save millions of soldiers on the battlefield from infection, that it forced the British and American governments to cooperate, pouring massive resources to figure out how to mass-produce penicillin. In the permanent Great Depression scenario, no war means no emergency medical budget. Penicillin will forever remain a rare liquid reserved only for the ultra-rich. Tens of millions will continue to die in agony from minor infected scratches, from pneumonia, from syphilis. Consequently, the Green Revolution of scientist Norman Borlaug, which saved over 1 billion people from starvation in the 20th century thanks to high-yield wheat varieties, will never receive funding. The world will fall into a deadly Malthusian trap. The population keeps being born, but food is insufficient, leading to global famine. Commercial aviation will not exist, as jet engines were initially furiously developed by Britain and Germany only to gain superiority in the military skies. In short, our year 2024 will wear the exhausted, gray, and primitive face of 1939. A perfect technological suppression. When hunger erodes the last shred of reason, people won't pray to God, they will turn to demagogues. Poverty and desperation are the finest fertilizers for extremism to sprout. You often think of America as the impregnable fortress of liberal democracy. The truth is, in the 1930s, America almost slipped into the abyss of a totalitarian dictatorship. Let me tell you about Huey Long, the senator from Louisiana. Exploiting public outrage, he launched the Share Our Wealth movement in 1934. His promises sounded like paradise: confiscate all the wealth of the ultra-rich, no one is allowed to own more than $5 million, and every American family will be given a free $5,000 by the government. This demagogic movement attracted 7.5 million fanatical members. In Louisiana, Huey Long ruled like a tyrant, using the National Guard as his private army to crush all political opponents. He even proudly declared, "I am Mussolini and Hitler rolled into one." When Huey Long was assassinated, the power vacuum was immediately filled by Father Charles Coughlin, an extremist radio star with an audience of up to 30 million listeners a week, meaning a quarter of the American population at the time hung on his every word. As the crisis deepened, Coughlin openly supported Hitler, spread vicious anti-Semitic propaganda, and called for the overthrow of the banking system. But the most terrifying truth, a real event swept under the rug in American history textbooks, is the business plot of 1933. A dark alliance of power, including the most notorious financial tycoons of Wall Street and industrial giants, secretly planned to overthrow President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt. They were too afraid of the state's wealth-sharing policies, so they decided to establish an American fascist dictatorship themselves. The elite's plan was to pump money to fund an army of 500,000 veterans, march on Washington, D.C., overthrow the legitimate government, and install General Smedley Butler as a puppet dictator. This plan only failed because General Butler was an honest patriot. He exposed the entire conspiracy before a congressional committee. But in the reality of the permanent depression, when the economy collapses completely in the 40s, the Democratic administration will lose all support. The coup plot will succeed. An American fascism regime will be born. Industrial tycoons like Henry Ford, an open anti-Semite who once received a medal from Nazi Germany, will become the ones holding supreme power of life and death. Millions of unemployed workers will be herded into massive forced labor camps of corporations, living and dying as modern slaves under a banner of fake freedom. The devastating consequences of the economy will slowly eat away at the biological and moral structure of society. Without World War II and the subsequent economic boom, the baby boomer era, the golden generation driving global development, will never be born. At the peak of the 1930s crisis, marriage and birth rates in the U.S. hit a historic low. Young people couldn't even afford a decent meal, let alone start a family. When lifelong careers disappear, replaced by precarious manual labor, human psychology shatters. We will witness an earlier and thousands of times larger version of the hikikomori phenomenon in Japan. Tens of millions of American and European youth will choose to withdraw completely from society, locking themselves in dark rooms, cutting off all contact, wasting away in permanent depression. But the darkest part doesn't stop there. When a totalitarian state cannot feed 25% of its unemployed population, they will find ways to eliminate the freeloaders. Did you know that eugenics, racial cleansing, didn't originate in Nazi Germany, but was once extremely popular and legalized in dozens of U.S. states? In this dark timeline, to reduce the budget burden, the fascist government will expand forced sterilization laws on an unprecedented scale. The chronically poor, the mentally disabled, the physically handicapped will be stripped of their reproductive rights, herded into workhouses, penal labor workhouses, just like in the Middle Ages. Human rights will become a luxury concept, buried at the bottom of humiliating survival. This is the cruelest finishing blow to the entire landscape of humanity. An America dying from internal crisis, torn apart by famine and bloody riots, will automatically shrink into a fortress North America. They will pursue extreme isolationism, slam shut all diplomatic doors, closing their eyes and covering their ears to the screams of the rest of the world. And when the guardian of the free world falls, the wolves are free to tear the prey apart. Look at Asia. In real history, the Japanese Empire recklessly attacked Pearl Harbor because of the U.S. oil embargo. But in this scenario, a cowardly and exhausted America would never dare issue that embargo. With no threat, Japan would have no need to wake the sleeping giant in Hawaii. With their hands completely free, the Imperial Japanese Army would consolidate their iron grip on Manchuria and sweep down to swallow Southeast Asia entirely, establishing a permanent, Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Imagine the fate of Indochina, including Vietnam. Without the intervention of the Allies, without weapons, aid or hope from the outside, all national liberation movements would be crushed in the cradle by the flawless fascist military machine. Vietnam would no longer be a nation, it would be turned into a megaplantation, a giant sweatshop factory permanently serving the war and industrial machine of Tokyo. The rubber plantations in the south would expand to the horizon, watered by the blood and sweat of millions of forced laborers generation after generation. Colonial exploitation would be mechanized and systematized to the maximum. Future generations of Vietnamese born in that dark future would only know one destiny: to be slaves producing rice and minerals to feed a brutal motherland thousands of kilometers away. On the other side of the hemisphere, the situation is even more tragic. The United Kingdom, the last lonely island standing in the way of the enemy, has run out of gold and blood. In reality, they survived thanks to the massive Lend-Lease program worth tens of billions of dollars from the US. But when America refuses to open its purse, Britain will starve and run out of ammunition. Under the pressure of carpet bombing from the Luftwaffe and the severance of maritime supply lines, Britain will be forced to swallow its pride and sign an armistice with Adolf Hitler. They will commit to turning a blind eye to continental Europe, just to keep a remnant of their empire. And the Soviet Union? If Hitler is sane enough to realize that opening the Eastern Front to invade Russia is suicide, he will stop, consolidating absolute domination in Western and Central Europe. Stalin's Soviet Union, also deeply scarred by internal issues, will be content with maintaining its territory and retreating into isolationism. And do you know what will replace the atomic bomb? Without the Manhattan Project led by the US out of fear that Germany would get the bomb first, nuclear weapons will never appear. Instead, to control massive populations in the colonies, authoritarian empires will pour all their resources into something cheaper and more ruthless: biological and chemical weapons. Artificial pandemics will be cultivated in labs and dropped on areas showing signs of rebellion. Industrial-scale genocides will happen in silence, no one will speak up, no United Nations will be formed to intervene. Supreme racism, slave labor regimes, and imperialism will continue to rule this earth for centuries more. The prosperity we breathe today, the privileges of freedom you take for granted, are not an inevitable gift of nature. Looking back, the Great Depression of 1929 was not actually a normal cyclical recession of capitalism, but a perpetual equilibrium of decay. The world's financial system was clinically dead at that time, and it could not heal itself. It took an exogenous shock with the magnitude of a meteorite explosion, which is World War II, along with the unjust deaths of over 70 million souls, to forcefully reboot the global industrial and financial machine through violence. The war inadvertently created a massive artificial demand, forcing governments to cast aside all budget constraints, pumping infinite money to fund science and technology, and most importantly, it eradicated unemployment by throwing young men into munitions factories and into the trenches. We are standing on the thin ice of civilization, forged from the blood and bones of a generation crushed in the World War. If that bloody turning point hadn't occurred, the 20th century would never have been recorded by history for the brilliant progress of space science, medicine, or the expansion of human rights. Instead, it would be recorded by the desperate sighs of generations born into debt, raised in the shadow of the Dust Bowl, and dying under the iron boots of totalitarian dictatorships. Crises don't teach humans to become better, they merely peel back the mask of civilization to reveal the beast within. And that brings us back to our reality today. We are living in an incredibly fragile world, connected by thin threads of credit. When looking at the ghost of returning inflation, the massive unpayable public debts, along with the terrifying rise of extreme populist political movements on both sides of the ocean, perhaps, we should ask ourselves a chilling question: is a second Great Depression silently waiting for us ahead? And if that death spiral repeats once again, what, or what force, can save humanity, when we cannot, and must not, use a third world war with nuclear weapons to reboot the world? Will artificial intelligence be the savior pumping blood into the economy, or will it be the automated scythe pushing billions of people into a permanent liquidity trap by stripping away all human jobs? Human history is always a symphony full of terrifying random variables, dependent on tiny twists of fate. Looking back at this dark scenario, what do you think? If there were no World War II, would human intellect have enough power to find another peaceful way out, another miraculous economic theory to escape the Great Depression? Or would we truly sink deep into a second dark age with no tomorrow? Don't keep those thoughts to yourself. Step down to the comments section and leave your perspective, counter-argue and debate with us. The greatest minds are always born from the friction of opposing ideas. If you feel a chill down your spine and are captivated by this journey through bloody parallel realities, don't forget to smash that like button to break the algorithm. Share this video with your friends who are passionate about history, economics, and the macro mysteries of humanity. And most importantly, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, to continue accompanying us in unfolding the craziest, most brutal, and most mind-expanding what-if scenarios of human civilization. Goodbye, thank you for bravely facing reality, and see you in the next dimension.